The day I saw my wife kneeling in front of another man wasn't some dramatic scene from a movie, and it didn't happen in some far-off place like a hotel room or a hidden apartment. It happened in my garage, on a Wednesday, at 4:12 in the afternoon. That's how I remember it. It wasn't even supposed to be a big day. I had just come home early from work because the AC in our office gave out, and management thought it'd be best to let everyone go before we melted into our desks. So I came home, hoping to grab a cold drink, sit on the patio, maybe even surprise Emily with the dinner I was thinking about picking up. Instead, I opened the side door to the garage, and I stood there, stunned, completely frozen, watching my wife of 8 years, her hair tied up, her shirt pulled halfway up her back, with her mouth around the guy I'd seen jogging around the block every morning. I didn't slam the door. I didn't shout. I just backed away slowly and quietly closed it behind me, as if I had just stepped into the wrong house and didn't want to make a scene. I didn't even see his face clearly, but I knew who he was. I'd seen him with his earbuds in, smiling and waving at me whenever I was putting out the trash. I never thought much of it. He looked like he was in his early 30s, maybe younger. I had never even caught his name. I sat in my car for over an hour, not turning the engine on, not thinking about anything except how normal the weather was. I remember that clearly. It wasn't too hot, not too cold, just average, like nothing in the world was wrong. I didn't cry. That came later. At that moment, I was just stunned at how quiet betrayal could be. There wasn't any dramatic music, no thunderstorm, not even a sudden gust of wind. Just a regular afternoon, the sound of birds somewhere in the distance, and my wife's betrayal burning into my memory like a slow leak I didn't notice until the damage was beyond repair. I waited until I saw him walk down the driveway, his head down, hoodie up, not a care in the world. He didn't even look up, just walked away like he'd forgotten something inside and didn't want to make a fuss. I gave it another 10 minutes before I went inside. Emily was in the kitchen, slicing a cucumber like she hadn't just been caught giving a blowjob to a stranger in the garage. I stood in the doorway, my mouth dry, heart pounding, and I said the first thing that came to mind. What the hell was that? She didn't even flinch. She paused, set the knife down, and turned to face me with this look that wasn't quite guilt, but wasn't surprise either. It was like she had expected this moment for a long time and had already gone through every possible version of it in her head. "You weren't supposed to be home," she said, and her voice was calm, way too calm. I stared at her, waiting for her to panic, to cry, to scream, to deny it. Instead, she just picked up the knife again and went back to the cucumber like we were having a casual conversation about groceries. "You weren't supposed to be home?" I repeated, walking into the kitchen, my hands shaking now. "That's all you have to say?" She sighed and looked at me like I was being unreasonable. "I didn't want to hurt you, Daniel. I swear." "You didn't want to hurt me?" I laughed, but it sounded wrong, like something breaking. "You were in our garage, with some guy's dick in your mouth, and you're telling me you didn't want to hurt me?" "He's not some guy," she said, finally dropping the knife. "I know that sounds worse, but it's not like it was random." "Oh, well then, by all means," I said, my voice rising. "Tell me how your familiarity with his dick makes this better." "Don't do that," she said, her eyes narrowing. "Don't act like you didn't feel it. We've been distant for months. We've been tired, Emily. Tired, not distant. That's what happens when two people work full-time jobs and try to keep a house running. That doesn't mean you get to crawl around on your knees for the guy from the track." Her face tightened, and for a second, I thought she was going to throw something at me. Instead, she wiped her hands on a towel and leaned against the counter like this was just some inconvenience we needed to sort out. "It's not just about sex," she said quietly. "It's about feeling seen." I stepped back like she had slapped me. "I see you every damn day. I kiss you goodnight. I make your coffee. I do the dishes when you're too tired. I take care of the lawn. I clean the gutters. I've painted this house with my bare hands twice. What more do you want?" "I don't know," she said, almost whispering now. "I didn't plan it." "Bullshit. You don't just accidentally suck someone's dick in a garage. You made a choice." She didn't respond. She just stared at me, breathing hard, her eyes glassy but not quite crying. That's when I realized she hadn't said sorry once. Not once. And that broke me more than anything else. I turned around, walked to the living room, and sat on the edge of the couch, my legs bouncing, my mind racing through every normal day that suddenly felt like a lie. I had no idea what to do. Leave? Scream? Throw something? It all felt too small, too pointless. She stood in the hallway, watching me, waiting, like this was just another argument we were going to talk through later. I didn't say anything else. I just sat there, trying to remember the last time I had felt safe in my own home. And just like that, I realized I never would again. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my side of the bed with my eyes open, staring at the wall, while she turned away from me like nothing had happened. She didn't try to speak, didn't reach for me, didn't say a single word. The only sound in the room was the quiet ticking of the cheap clock on her nightstand, the one we bought together during some random trip to Target years ago. I counted every tick. At some point, I gave up on pretending to rest and got out of bed without making a sound, walked to the kitchen, and sat at the table with a glass of milk that I never drank. I just needed to be away from her, away from the smell of her shampoo, away from the fake peace she was pretending we still had. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. She should have been crying, apologizing, trying to fix what she broke. But she was calm, like this wasn't a betrayal, just a decision she made and expected me to accept. The next morning, I sat across from her at the table while she spread cream cheese on a bagel like she wasn't the woman I caught with another man. She had the nerve to ask if I wanted the other half, like we were just two normal people starting their day. I looked at her for a long time before I answered, wondering if she really thought we could just move on like nothing happened. Why him? I asked, my voice low, steady. Out of everyone, why that guy? She didn't look up from the bagel. He talks to me. I blinked a few times, trying to process how little sense that made. I talk to you every day. No, you don't, she said, finally raising her eyes. You ask what we're eating. You ask what bills are due. You remind me to pick up laundry or bring the car in. That's not the same. That's marriage, Emily. That's life. You think I don't want more too? But I didn't go find it in someone else. She wiped her fingers on a napkin, slowly, precisely. I'm not excusing it. I just wanted to feel something again. You couldn't come to me with that. You couldn't just say it. I did. You didn't hear me. I laughed, bitter and quiet. So what? You found someone who did. Who listens better. And that makes it okay. No, she said, and this time her voice cracked a little. It doesn't make it okay. Then why are you still here? That made her pause. She looked at the floor, then at the table, then at me. Because I don't want to leave. I didn't do it to leave. You just did it to stay and ruin me, I said, standing up. Good to know. I didn't wait for her to respond. I grabbed my keys, my wallet, and left the house. I didn't even know where I was going. I just needed to breathe without feeling like I was choking on the smell of betrayal. I ended up at the park, the one we used to go to when we first moved into the neighborhood. I sat on a bench for an hour watching other people walk by, normal people, couples holding hands, kids playing, dogs running in circles. I watched all of them and wondered how many of them were pretending too. How many of them were sitting on top of secrets like the one I had just uncovered. I called my friend Marcus and told him everything. I hadn't planned to, but the words just came out once he picked up. We hadn't talked deeply in years, just texts and beers during football season. But in that moment, he was the only person I could think of who wouldn't give me a speech or a quote or some recycled wisdom about love and forgiveness. When I finished talking, he didn't say anything for a few seconds. Damn, he finally said. You serious? Yeah. Garage. Broad daylight. You gonna kick her out? I don't know. Man, if that was me, I'd be dragging her stuff out onto the lawn right now. Yeah, well, it's not that simple. It kind of is. It's not, I said, leaning forward. It's not just about her. It's everything. The house, the life, the years. You think I want to throw it all away over one thing? Bro, it's not just one thing. It's the one thing that breaks everything. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. He was right, but I wasn't ready to admit it yet. Not to him. Not even to myself. I drove back home later that day with my stomach in knots. I didn't know what I expected when I walked through the door. Maybe a letter, maybe packed bags, maybe some sign that she understood the weight of what she had done. But nothing had changed. She was folding laundry on the couch, like it was any other Saturday. She looked at me when I came in, but didn't say anything. I stood there in the doorway, just watching her move through the motions of a life she had just destroyed. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't going to leave. She wasn't going to end it. She wanted me to either forgive her or keep suffering in silence. She wanted things to go back to the way they were before, except now she wouldn't have to hide anything. I walked past her without a word, went into the bedroom, and opened the closet. I wasn't sure yet what I was looking for, but I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. I didn't speak to her for 2 full days. Not because I was trying to punish her, but because every time I opened my mouth, the words felt pointless. She went about the days like we were stuck in some awkward pause after an argument, as if this was just one of those weeks where we weren't on the same page and all we needed was a long talk and maybe some wine to smooth things over. She made dinner, folded towels, watched her shows with a blanket over her lap. She even asked if I wanted to go grocery shopping with her on Sunday, like she hadn't ripped the bottom out of our marriage on a weekday afternoon. I stayed quiet, but I was watching everything. I watched how she didn't flinch when I ignored her, how she didn't try too hard to break the silence, how she didn't seem ashamed in the slightest. That's when I knew this wasn't something she regretted. It was just something she got caught doing. That difference mattered. That difference became everything. By Monday morning, I had started my plan. I didn't slam doors or throw clothes on the lawn like people love to brag about. I started simple. I printed out a new budget. I opened a separate checking account. I put a lock on the filing cabinet in the office. She didn't even notice. Or maybe she did and decided not to say anything. Either way, I didn't care. I wasn't doing it for her. I was setting the stage for what came next. It wasn't enough to just leave her. I needed her to feel what she had done. I needed her to see it in real terms, not just as a rough patch or a mistake or whatever word she was going to use when she finally decided to explain it properly. That night, after dinner, I sat down across from her at the dining table. She had just finished cleaning up, and she looked surprised that I was sitting there like I had something to say. "I need you to tell me everything," I said, my voice calm. "Not parts. Not what you think I can handle. Everything." She hesitated for a second and then nodded, like she had been waiting for this and had rehearsed it already. "It started in January. I saw him at the community center. He's in the same book group I go to on Thursdays. So it wasn't random," I said. "You built this." She didn't deny it. "I didn't plan it. But yeah, I let it happen." "And how many times?" She looked down at her hands and answered so quietly I barely heard her. "4. For total or 4 different days?" She swallowed hard. "For times total." I leaned back, processing. "Always in the garage." She shook her head. "Once at his place." I sat in silence for a few seconds, letting the words sink in. I could feel my hands curling into fists on my lap, but I didn't move. "And you thought that wouldn't change anything?" "I didn't know what I thought," she said. "I was tired. I was lonely. I was in the house the entire time, Emily. You could have talked to me." "I did, Dan," she said more forcefully now. "But you were checked out." "No," I snapped. "I was tired. There's a difference. I didn't go looking for someone else to handle my boredom. You're making this black and white, and it's not." "It is to me," I said. "You open your mouth, you ask for help, or you end it before you destroy it. You don't cheat. You don't sneak around like a coward." She looked away, her jaw clenched, eyes wet. "I know I messed up." I stood up, walking to the kitchen, needing space even in that small room. I grabbed a glass, filled it with water, but didn't drink it. I just stared out the window over the sink, the dark backyard reflecting faintly in the glass. "So what now?" I asked finally. "What did you think would happen?" "I didn't know," she said behind me. "I thought maybe you'd never find out." "That's the part that makes it worse," I said without turning around. "You weren't sorry until it came out. You were going to keep living in this house and smiling at me and making plans like nothing was broken." She didn't answer. I walked back into the room, still holding the glass. "I'm not sleeping in that room anymore. I've moved my stuff to the office." "I figured," she said, her voice dull. "And I'm seeing a lawyer on Friday." That made her head snap up. "Wait, you're divorcing me?" I stared at her for a long moment. "You thought I wouldn't? I thought maybe we could try to fix it." "Fix what?" I said. "The blowjob in the garage or the lies for 2 months?" She flinched at the word, but I didn't back off. "I just thought," she began. "You didn't think," I cut in. "That's the problem. You did what you wanted, and now you're shocked that it has consequences." She sat back, looking like she was shrinking. I didn't feel anything from watching that. No pity, no sympathy, just exhaustion. Real, deep exhaustion that came from realizing the person I had built my life with wasn't who I thought she was. And maybe she hadn't been for a long time. "I'm not doing this to punish you," I said finally. "I'm doing it because I can't trust you. And once that's gone, there's nothing left." She nodded slowly, her eyes filling but still not letting the tears fall. She always hated crying in front of people, even me. I waited another minute to see if she'd say anything, but when she didn't, I walked away. The day I decided on the revenge, it wasn't planned with rage or any sudden urge to burn everything down. It came quietly while I was shaving. I looked at myself in the mirror and didn't recognize the man in front of me. Not because I looked different, but because of how tired I looked, how defeated. I realized I couldn't let that be the version of me she walked away from. I needed her to know that what she did wasn't just a scratch on our history. It was something that would leave a permanent mark, not only on the relationship, but on how I would walk through the world after this. I didn't want her to cry. I didn't want her to beg. I wanted her to understand how it feels when the person you trust most makes you feel disposable. So I started working through the details. I waited a few more days, played it quiet, distant, not cold, just neutral. I didn't tell her when I left the house. I didn't explain where I was going. When she asked if we could talk, I said I was tired. When she brought up the lawyer again, I told her I hadn't made up my mind yet. That part was a lie. I had already picked the lawyer, signed a retainer, and gathered the financial documents. But it was important that she thought I was still unsure. It gave me time to work on the next step. I called Marcus and told him I needed a favor. "I need a photographer," I said, sitting in my car outside a cafe. "A photographer?" he repeated. "For what?" "I want photos. Of me. Doing better. Living better. With someone better." "Jesus, you're moving fast." "I'm not dating. I don't need a woman. I need the idea of one." He paused, then laughed once. "Okay. So, fake dates." "Exactly. I want her to feel what I felt. I want her to see me smiling in photos the way she was probably smiling after she left the garage that day. I can make that happen." The woman Marcus set me up with wasn't someone I knew well, but she owed him a favor and agreed to help. Her name was Nora. She was smart, easy to talk to, and thankfully had a sense of humor about the whole thing. We met 3 times over the course of a week, dressed up, went out to nice places, and took just enough pictures to make it all seem real. Dinner at a rooftop bar, a drink by the lake, one shot of me opening a car door for her. She even posted a couple of them to her account and tagged me. I didn't have to do much else. Within 24 hours, Emily saw them. She didn't say anything that night, but I saw her checking her phone more than usual. I saw the way her mood shifted, how her hands were a little more tense at the dinner table. The next morning, I caught her scrolling through Nora's profile. She looked up at me, then quickly set her phone down like it hadn't happened. "You've been going out a lot," she said casually while pouring coffee. "I guess I have," I replied without looking up. "Anyone I should know about?" I smiled. "Probably not." She didn't say anything after that. She just nodded and walked away, but her hand was shaking slightly as she picked up the mug. That small moment felt better than any screaming match ever could. It was quiet, but it landed exactly where it needed to. 2 days later, she asked if I was seeing someone. I looked her dead in the eye and said yes. She asked if it had started before or after we stopped sleeping in the same bed. I told her it didn't matter because we weren't married anymore in any real way. Her face changed completely. The same calm she used against me during our first conversation disappeared, and for the first time since this started, I saw the weight of what she did settle into her expression. "So this is payback?" she asked. "No," I said. "This is me moving on. You're not even divorced yet. You weren't divorced when you were in the garage either." She blinked, took a slow breath, and sat down at the edge of the couch. "Is it serious?" "No," I answered, knowing it didn't matter what the truth was. "But it feels good to be around someone who didn't lie to me." "Do you want to punish me or move on?" she asked, her voice low. "I don't want to punish you," I said, "but I want you to feel it. Just for a second. I want you to feel what it's like to be replaced." She sat there staring at the floor, not speaking. I walked past her, grabbed my jacket, and left the house again. I didn't go far. Just needed her to sit in that silence, just like I had for days. We finally had a real conversation 5 days later. It was a Tuesday night, and she asked if we could sit down without arguing. I said yes, mostly out of curiosity, because I wanted to see what kind of version of the story she would try to sell me now that she'd seen the photos, now that she had time to sit in what she caused. We sat across from each other at the dining table, no food, just 2 mugs of tea she made like it was a normal winter night, and not the slow unraveling of a marriage. She started the conversation with something soft, like she thought easing into it would make it go down better. "I've been thinking a lot." I nodded but didn't say anything. I didn't want to make it easier for her. If she had something to say, she was going to have to carry it herself. I know you don't believe me, she said, looking directly at me. But I never wanted to hurt you. I wasn't trying to throw away what we had. What did you think would happen? I asked. You keep seeing him and I never find out. And we go on like everything's fine? No, it wasn't like that. Then explain it. She paused like she had practiced the answer, but now wasn't sure how to deliver it. I felt invisible, she said slowly. I felt like nothing I did mattered. I'd talk to you and get half answers or no answers. I'd go to sleep next to you and feel like I was on my own. That doesn't make what I did right, but I didn't just wake up one day and decide to cheat. I felt invisible too, I said. I just didn't take my clothes off for someone else to solve it. I know, she whispered. That's why I've been asking myself over and over why I didn't just leave. Because you didn't want to lose what I gave you, I said. The house, the comfort, the reputation, the image of stability. You wanted both. You wanted to feel like you were still desirable without risking the benefits of being my wife. Her eyes narrowed slightly, not in anger, but in realization that I wasn't going to pretend she was a victim in this. I did appreciate our life, she said. I still do. But it started to feel like I was just surviving in it. I didn't know how to bring that up without making things worse. So you chose the worst thing. She nodded slowly. Yeah, I did. We sat there for a while without talking. I stared at the wall behind her, thinking about how many times we'd sat at that table eating meals, planning holidays, laughing over dumb TV shows. I wondered if those moments ever felt real to her, or if she had already checked out back then and was just performing what a wife is supposed to be. I've stopped seeing him, she said after a long silence. Completely. I ended it right after you found out. I didn't ask you to, I replied. I know. I just thought you should hear it. Are you expecting something from that? Like I'll forgive you now? I don't know, she said honestly. I'm not expecting anything. I just wanted to be honest for once. I took a sip of the tea, even though it had gone cold. It gave me something to do with my hands. You've been honest now. So what do you want to happen next? She hesitated. I want to stay married. That was the first time I felt truly angry since it all began. Not loud, not violent, just angry in a deep way that makes you feel like your stomach is curling into itself. You want to stay married? I repeated. Why? Because I still love you. No, you don't, I said. You love what we built. You love the security. You love that I made life easier for you. But you don't love me. That's not true. Then how do you treat someone you don't love? She didn't answer. You can't ask to stay married after what you did, I continued. Not unless you're ready to spend the rest of your life proving it meant nothing and that it'll never happen again. And even then, there's no guarantee I'll ever feel the same about you. I'm ready to try, she said quietly. But I'm not sure I want to. She blinked, the words hitting her in a way she clearly wasn't prepared for. She opened her mouth to speak, but stopped herself. I've thought a lot too, I said. I've thought about what I need to feel okay again. I don't think staying with you gives me that. Even if you're sorry. Even if you never do it again. I don't think I'll ever trust you like I did. And I don't want to spend the next 20 years watching your face for signs of lying. I understand, she said, eyes wet but still not crying. I don't blame you. Good, I replied. Because I'm not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing it to save myself. She nodded and wiped under her eyes with the back of her hand. So what happens now? I'll file the papers this week. You'll get your copies in the mail. We'll split things clean. I'm not going to drag this out. I don't want to fight, she said. I'll agree to everything. We sat in silence again, both knowing this was probably the last real conversation we'd ever have as husband and wife. There was nothing left to say. The end wasn't loud or dramatic. It was just clear. 3 weeks after that final conversation, she moved out. It wasn't a dramatic exit. She didn't pack in a hurry or leave in the middle of the night. She took her time, carefully folding clothes, boxing kitchenware, wrapping her framed pictures in old towels. I stayed out of her way. I didn't help and I didn't interrupt. I just let her move through the space like a tenant clearing out an apartment she'd rented too long. The house felt quiet, but not in an uncomfortable way. It felt clean, in a way I hadn't realized I missed. The kind of quiet that isn't hiding anything. When the moving truck pulled out of the driveway, she came back inside one last time. She stood near the front door with her keys in her hand and looked at me like she was waiting for some final word, maybe hoping I'd change my mind. I was standing by the window, arms crossed, just watching her. If there's anything you need me to come back for, she said, just text. I won't, I replied. She nodded slowly and stepped outside. She didn't close the door all the way. I walked over and shut it behind her. That night, I sat on the couch and watched TV for a few hours without really watching anything. The house felt different. Not better, not worse, just real. Like the furniture, the air, the silence, all belonged to me again. No one was sitting a few feet away pretending. No one was answering questions with half-truths. I wasn't listening for tones in her voice or reading into pauses between sentences. It was just me, and it was enough. Over the next week, I changed the locks, updated the Wi-Fi password, moved my clothes into the master bedroom again, and tossed out the throw pillows she insisted we needed. I called a plumber to fix the leak under the sink she had kept reminding me about. I also canceled the couple's massage she booked 6 months earlier, the one we never went to. It was strange, going through all the motions of taking a life apart, but it didn't hurt like I thought it would. It felt like cleaning up after a long guest visit. Necessary and overdue. Marcus came by that weekend, and we grilled burgers in the backyard. He didn't say anything about the divorce, and I didn't bring it up. At some point, he asked if I was going to start dating again, and I told him I didn't know. "You look better," he said while flipping a burger. "I feel less like I'm being watched," I said. "Probably because you aren't," he replied. That night, I deleted all the photos of her from my phone. Not out of bitterness, but because I didn't need reminders of someone who made me question my sanity for months. I also deleted the fake date photos with Nora. That part was done. I didn't need to keep pretending I was winning anything. I had already won the only thing that mattered: peace. A few days later, I got a text from Emily. "I've signed everything. It'll be finalized in a few weeks." "I'm sorry." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. She said what she needed to say, and I wasn't interested in continuing anything beyond the paperwork. About a month after she left, I ran into the guy, the one from the garage. He was at a gas station, filling up his car. He recognized me first. His eyes got wide like he was expecting me to walk over and punch him. I didn't. I just looked at him and shook my head once, not angry, not warning him, just tired of the whole thing. He didn't say a word. He got in his car and left. That night, I thought about what I would have said if I had talked to him. Maybe nothing. Maybe just asked him if it was worth it. But the truth is, it didn't matter anymore. She was out of my life, and whatever they had was already broken before it began. He got a version of her I no longer had to deal with, and that was enough for me. I've stopped trying to make sense of why she did it. I don't need to understand every thought that led to it. What matters is I know how it ended. I handled it on my terms. I didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't fall apart in front of her. I took control and walked out with my head up. Now, when I wake up, the first thing I feel is stillness. No tension in the air. No guessing games. I go to work. I come home. I make my own dinner, and I sleep in a bed that no longer feels like a lie. Maybe one day I'll meet someone new. Maybe not. But right now, I'm just living without the weight of someone else's decisions sitting on my chest. That's all I ever really wanted. That's what I got. And that's how it ended.